João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, President of the Republic of Angola. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Your Excellency, Philemon Yang, President of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished heads of state and government, heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen. It is with a very special sense of honor that I address Your Excellencies and all participants in this 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly, which is taking place within a very international worrying context where international relations, the tensions are worsening due to the prevailing multiple conflicts of different nature and intensity in various parts of our planet. It is understandable that in face of such a high level of instability and insecurity, it would be much more difficult to attain the major sustainable development goals and other goals that we set by this organization with a view to achieving all the targets that we have set for ourselves. Allow me to extend a special greeting to His Excellency Philemon Yang on his election as the President of the 79th session of the General Assembly, which is of a special significance for the entire African continent and for his country, the Republic of Cameroon, as the duties he has performed there with proven dedication and efficiency put him in a position to successfully guide the proceedings of this session. Allow me to extend my sincere best wishes of success in this position, convinced that his commitment will make an important contribution to strengthening the role of our organization as a decisive and irreplaceable player in global governance. I also want to congratulate the outgoing President, His Excellency Denis Francis, to whom I address a word of great appreciation for the way he has performed his duties and for the results he has achieved during his term of office. I also would like to praise and commend Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, for his great dedication to our common cause of building a world of peace, security, harmony, and concord, development, and equal opportunities for all. We value much his work even more as it is being carried out within a complex global context full of challenges and threats that he has managed to deal with pragmatism, responsibility, and great wisdom and courage. Excellencies, since the founding of the United Nations after the end of the Second World War, the people of our planet have longed for a peaceful coexistence on a global scale, believing that episodes that could jeopardize universal harmony, peace, security would be subject of careful attention and preemptive measures taken within our organization so that they would not degenerate into conflicts and wars that would revive the distressing moments experienced during the period from 1939 to 1945. After almost 8 decades, what we objectively can observe today is that not only has this perspective not been realized, but we seem to be moving away from the founding purposes of the United Nations. In view of this reality, we need to see where we have failed and what collective measures we should take to make the United Nations more active and effective in seeking solutions that contribute to preventing conflicts, strengthening global peace and security, boosting international trade and cooperation, and ensure the prosperity of our nations and well-being of the peoples of our planet. Today we are witnessing an attempt to undermine, ignore, or even to replace the role and importance of the United Nations in resolving the major issues that afflict humanity, particularly those related to universal peace and security. In this context, there is no more appropriate stage other than this August Assembly to reverse this reality and to accept the urgent need to reform this institution with a special emphasis on adapting the Security Council to the realities of the contemporary world. Its current format and composition still reflects the post-war reality that has been largely overtaken by time and development in other regions of the planet, many of which were colonized countries that are now independent member countries of the United Nations. The reform of the United Nations Security Council and the international financial institutions that emerged from Bretton Woods seems to be urgent and pressing in order to give voice to the countries of Global South, namely Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, and the Indian subcontinent. The imperative of multilateralism must prevail as the only framework truly capable of safeguarding the common interest of all humanity, within which we must reaffirm our resolute commitment to diplomacy, inclusive dialogue, and the use of peaceful means to resolving conflicts. It is within this spirit that the Republic of Angola is deeply committed to the process of seeking solutions to conflicts in Africa, notably the greatest efforts at this moment is focused on the conflict prevailing in East Democratic Republic of the Congo without neglecting those occurring in Sudan and in the Sahel region. As part of the Luanda process, a ceasefire was reached in the eastern DRC, which came into force on 4th August this year. In order to consolidate the gains achieved, a draft peace agreement was put on the table by the Republic of Angola, involving the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the Republic of Rwanda. The terms of the said agreement have been discussed by the parties at ministerial level with the aim of reaching an understanding that would give rise to the holding of a summit meeting to seal the signing of the final peace agreement and reestablishment of relations between the DRC and Rwanda. We are very concerned about the situation prevailing in Sudan, where a violent war is being waged with dramatic humanitarian consequences, despite a certain apathy of the international community, which must seek to combine its efforts and act in coordination with the African Union to promote and achieve a long-lasting peace. We are using the experience gained by Angola in resolving its internal conflict, which after several decades was definitively resolved through inclusive dialogue between the warring parties to benefit peace in Africa. We have learned from our own conflict that there is no peace without dialogue, and no peace without trade-offs on both parties. This is a path that cannot be neglected in the context of all efforts to be developed to resolve the serious security crisis that the world is currently facing. Russia's war against Ukraine has seriously and profoundly shaken Europe's stability and security, with strong repercussions to the rest of the world in terms of economic stability and food and energy security. We have witnessed a continuous escalation of that conflict, which has been escalating in a worrying manner with devastating effects on the internal situation of the warring countries due to the use of increasingly lethal weapons, without these heralding any prospect of solution to that intricate problem. Despite the increasingly sophisticated military and other means being used in the theater of operations, no military victory is in sight in this war, which is likely to spread to the rest of Europe unless a negotiated solution is found based on compliance with the principle of the United Nations, which safeguard the sovereignty of states, the indivisibility and territorial integrity of the countries. Failure to upholding the principles of the United Nations Charter is a root cause of many of the problems and tensions that are proliferating throughout our planet, where particular geopolitical interests and ambitions, contrary to the values advocated by the international community, often affect the security and stability of entire regions of our planet. In the Middle East, we have witnessed and condemned the killing and kidnapping of defenseless Israeli civilians on the 7th of October last year. As a result of that, although Israel has the right to protect its territory, to guarantee the safety of its citizens, and to seek to rescue the hostages whose whereabouts are still unknown, it should do everything it can to prevent the genocide that the world is witnessing live in Gaza Strip and the attacks on settlements and expansion of settlements in the West Bank. In that conflict, the main victims are defenseless and vulnerable human beings, namely children, women, the elderly and sick, who are killed indiscriminately not only by the air and artillery bombs, but also because they are deprived by force of arms from accessing and supplying the most basic rights, such as access to food, drinking water, medicine, housing and medical and pharmaceutical assistance, and destruction of the main infrastructures such as schools, hospitals, houses, energy, and others. We are witnessing the death of alarming numbers of journalists from international networks, UN employees, and workers from international humanitarian organizations, which is unacceptable and condemnable. We cannot continue to allow that in just 11 months, in a small territory without escape, nearly 43,000 people have been killed, and that their perpetrators have not been held accountable by the international community. The international community cannot be indifferent to this situation that threatens the existence of the Palestinian people, who have the same right to live in peace and security in the territory of their ancestors, such as the Jewish people. We are concerned about the spread of the conflict to other countries because it threatens peace and security throughout the Middle East and opens up the dangerous possibility of direct involvement of the major world powers and thus render the conflict into World War I with all possible consequences on a global scale. We are faced with the fact that once again highlights the role of the United Nations, its decisions and resolutions, which, if strictly and rigorously upheld, would resolve the impasse surrounding the creation of the sovereign state of Palestine, with the only way to put a definitive end to the problem that the Middle East has been facing for decades. I would like to take this opportunity to once again call for an end to the embargo against Cuba and the sanctions on Zimbabwe, the current chair of our regional economic community, the SADC, because they are unjust and inhuman as they increase the suffering of their people and greatly hinder the economic and social development of those countries. Excellencies, as a part of the collective efforts undertaken by the nations of our planet to consolidate peace, African countries have been increasingly sought to contribute effectively to the United Nations missions aimed at bringing stabilities to countries and regions in conflict. Such peace operations are often not carried out within the time frame and effectiveness required due to financial constraints faced by the countries willing to participate. Fortunately, this situation seems to have eventually been overcome at the Security Council, representing a decisive step towards strengthening and operability and effectiveness of the African Union-led peace-building missions, which now has a financing mechanism more suitable to its operations. I warmly welcome these developments, especially because Africa wants to be increasingly present not only in the discussion but also in the decision-making and resolution process of major global issues. Excellencies, we intend to be part of the construction of a new international financial architecture within which a close collaboration among states is essential with a view to effectively fight the illicit flow of capital and the recovery of assets, which is often difficult for the countries that hold the funds under their control, even without a plausible justification. It is important to note that funds that come from asset recovery processes have a direct impact on the implementation of sustainable development goals and consequently on improving the general living conditions of our populations. Angola has made significant progress in the fight against corruption, with specific cases of citizens who have been tried and convicted who saw their assets forfeited in favor of the state by virtue of sentences handed down in courts and confirmed by the competent courts of appeal. As regards asset recovery, we have had 2 successful cases in which we countered with a highly responsible attitude and respect for our sovereignty by the United Kingdom authorities, who have returned to Angola $2.5 billion that were sitting in a bank in London, and it is befitting to acknowledge this fact publicly from this World Forum. Unfortunately, not all countries that agreed to accept these proceeds from corruption without questioning their origin at the time, today respect the rulings of our courts, which are binding. Some of these countries even claim the right to question the credibility of our courts, almost wanting to review the sentences issued by our courts as if they were extraterritorial appeal bodies. These assets are the property of our states already impoverished during the colonial period. We will therefore continue to fight with all our strength to recover the assets that were embezzled from public treasury that are sorely needed for the construction of infrastructure such as school, hospital, energy and water facilities, roads, amongst others. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Republic of Angola advocates for the urgent implementation of reforms that will lead to a fair representation of African countries within the main international financial institutions in order to stand for the decision-making and development of policies that have impact on the daily life of the populations of the concerned countries. We are firmly committed to leaving no one behind, acting together to promote peace, sustainable development, and human dignity for present and future generations. In line with this motto of 79th session, we must mobilize efforts, capabilities, and all resources at our disposal to promote policies, measures, and programs that make it possible to materialize the intentions contained therein. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Republic of Angola is making a great effort to put the country on the path of progress and development based on policies that establish priorities contained in the National Development Plan, whose main pillars are economy diversification, public debt reduction, mobilization of domestic revenues, optimization of public expenditures in priority sectors such as health and education, and implementation of special social protection schemes. The tasks that we have proposed to carry out in the areas that I've just mentioned are complex. They require time and sufficiently qualified human resources to carry them out successfully. But despite this situation, we are making encouraging progresses whose benefits will be felt over time. Among the successful initiatives, I would like to mention the construction of water transfer systems for areas severely affected by droughts in the south of Angola, where poverty and misery are paving the way for a prospect of prosperity and a more dignified life for the population, who can now count on water available in sufficient quantities to transform arid zones into areas for agricultural production and livestock farming without the previous risk that used to jeopardize human and animal survival. As part of the government of Angola's action to improve the national social situation and create factors that boost the development of industry and agriculture, we have embarked on the path of electrification of the country in all its latitudes. We have invested in production of clean energies with construction of large hydropower plants and photovoltaic parks, meaning that 60% of the country's energy matrix will be now coming from clean sources, with a trend to phase out the thermal power plants still in operation over the next 3 years. In terms of clean energy production, in addition to the more than 6,500 megawatts produced currently, we are building the Kakulka-Bas hydropower plant, which will produce more than 2,000 megawatts and will soon begin the construction of the country's largest photovoltaic park with financing of $1.5 billion from the U.S. Exim Bank to supply off-grid power to a considerable number of locations in the provinces of Wila, Kunene, Namib, and Kwantkubango. With this additional energy production project underway, our biggest focus at the moment is on public investment or public-private partnerships to build high and medium voltage transmission lines to the east and south of the country with a view to interconnect with the SADC power grid to the east via Zambia and to the south via Namibia. We currently have a considerable supply of electricity production which requires transmission and distribution networks to take it to potential beneficiaries in all parts of the country and also to the southern African countries which need this resource for their development. Interested investors now have the opportunity to sell electricity produced in Angola to customers in the mining areas in the DRC and Zambia, as well as to SADC countries in general, with a focus on the largest industrial and domestic consumer, which is South Africa. Angola is developing a number of initiatives that are part of the effort to ensure the implementation of the international climate agenda with a focus on climate change mitigation and adaptation measures, always taking care to exploit our fossil resources in a responsible manner in order to ensure the development and well-being of our populations. It is important to highlight that we've made a major public investment in Angola in the health sector throughout the country, with the rapid construction of well-equipped hospital infrastructure at all three levels, and with an ambitious training and recruitment program for health practitioners for our national health system. Ladies and gentlemen, in the current times, among the major priorities of the African continent is the issue of development based on trade, promotion, and intensification, which is essential to build infrastructure that ensure connectivity among African countries, mobility of economic operators, and favor the free trade amongst all within the scope of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Within this perspective, the Republic of Angola has established partnerships at international level to ensure the operationalization of the Benguela Railway, the mining and commercial ports of Lobito within the framework of the major transnational transport and logistic project of the Lobito Corridor, which will ensure the faster, safer and more competitively priced flow of minerals, agricultural and industrial products produced in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Zambia and Angola across the Atlantic Ocean to the rest of the world. This is a catalyst project that will change the economic landscape in Angola and in Southern Africa by allowing the emergence of a number of various enterprises along the Lobito Corridor with direct impact on the economies of the southern sub-region of Africa and other regions of our continent. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Republic of Angola is a hospitable country, open to the world and always ready to act as a proactive partner to help increase global cooperation in favor of the development and implementation of joint and complementary actions which help to respond to the permanent challenges in the fight against international terrorism and other threats to peace, world security, and sustainable development. With improvement of the business environment in recent years, we are open to tourism and direct private investment virtually in all sectors of our economy that are of interest to investors. You're welcome to Angola, and thank you very much for your attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Angola.